Okay, so here we go. Goldie. Sound cue is good. So we're just talking, having a conversation. Two old friends. If you mess something up or you want to go back, hey, I want to retell that story, or hey, I forgot about this part of the story or whatever.
Okay.
We can totally do that. No pressure whatsoever. It's just a fun reminiscing of George H. So tell me first of all, when did you start working here?
I started in December of 1980. Came to work, needed a part-time job. I was planning a trip in August of 81. I was going to go on a cross-country trip with my girlfriend and didn't know when I was coming back or if I was coming back. So I said I need a job for 8 months, and they hired me, and I worked for 8 months.
And then
at the end of the cross-country trip, I was flat broke and came home the day before Thanksgiving, and the day after Thanksgiving, Sue Wilson called me and told me to report to the office, and so that would have been end of November of 81, and that was it.
And are you still work here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So wow. So we're coming up on, geez, my math.
Well, technically it's 38 years.
Okay, so 38 years. Wow. And so when you first started here, how old were you?
I would have been 25.
Okay. And then, okay, so you had, I'm assuming, obviously, jobs prior to this one?
Yeah, just the basic kid jobs, working at Togo's and working in a gas station, and I worked for an alarm company for a while, and nothing that lasted too long.
And so what got you here? What was the...
Basically, I was in need of, like I said, I was in need of something to do for 8 months, and I'm pretty sure it was Sue Wilson. My memory's a little hazy on that, but I'm pretty sure it was Sue Wilson that just said, go to 125 River Street and report for work, and I said, okay.
Wow, just like that.
They were looking for someone to, I didn't go to work at the main building at first. I went to work, there was a job called Cinertech, which is now, it's a building on Natural Bridges Boulevard that's owned by UCSC now, and it's gone through a lot of it. It was Honeywell, it was a lot of different places, and they needed someone to unload trucks, and I knew nothing. So that's what I did for 8 months.
Okay, yeah, I remember that. I know that building well. So what is your job description now in terms of what do you do?
I am ACO. My ACO job description is buyer with George H. Wilson, and I was purchasing manager. And I used to sort of be in charge of the maintenance department and a lot of other things around here, but ACO is pretty compartmentalized. So I'm a buyer now. That's what I do.
So, and tell us, those who don't know, like me, what does that job entail, or what is that?
At the front end, when we're bidding work, I get pricing for material and equipment on a job. For example, water heaters or air conditioning units or piping, valves, and I supply it to the project managers that are bidding the job, so they know, they have some sort of idea what it's going to cost if they get the job. And then after they do get the job, I'm the one that buys the material and has it shipped either to the job site or here. And also as you can see, we stock a lot of stuff here, so we buy a lot of stuff for inventory too.
And is this a union job?
No, I'm not union.
Okay. So you said you started 80 and 81. What memories, was the grandpa still working at that point?
No, George had retired, but when so in 81, when I came back to work, I was sort of a catch-all. Every day I was somewhere different, but a lot of times I was in the yard at 125 River Street, and no one was really taking care of the yard at that point. So I just sort of started doing it. Nobody really told me to do it, but I just started doing it. So I spent a lot of time outside warehousing stuff and organizing stuff. And George at that point would come driving through. He wouldn't drive, he had a driver. But every day George would drive through the yard, and he would always stop and ask me at least one question. And he knew exactly where everything was supposed to be and what jobs they were for. And if something was missing or something was out of place or something was sloppy, he would want to talk about it. So, but he was technically retired at that point.
Okay, and so you said he'd always ask you one question. Was it the same question, or was it?
Nope, it's a different question every time. Where'd that stuff that was over there, where'd that go? Or how come this is such a mess over here, or something along those lines.
So he had a real attention to detail.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. And then what memories do you have working for Jim then?
Well, Jim and I worked together real closely for many years because he was project manager, and I'm sort of tied to those guys, like I said, because I do a lot of pricing for them, and then after they get the job, I'm the guy that buys all their material and equipment and writes subcontracts for them too. So and I had a relationship with Jim. Tom and I have been friends since we were 12, and Blue Wilson and I have been friends since I was probably around 15. So I knew Jim and Sue for a long time before I came to work here. And so 99% of the time, Jim Wilson was the greatest guy in the world to work for, and then 1% of the time, if he was upset, you didn't want to upset him.
And what would upset him?
Inefficiency. He was the sort of manager that sort of let you do your job. He didn't interfere, but he wanted it done. He wanted it done well, and if you didn't do it well, he would let you know.
In no uncertain terms.
Yep. One of my prized possessions is a quarter, which I still have on my wall. There was, and I have no idea what it was, because this would have been probably early 1990s, but there was some sort of equipment that was coming from the East Coast. It's probably an air conditioning unit or a chiller or something, and it was late, and I worked real hard on expediting it and making sure it was going to arrive in time for him to install it on his job. And I promised him, and he said it won't be here, and he bet me a quarter that it wouldn't make it, and it made it, I think, at like 4:30 in the afternoon on the very last day that it could have arrived. And so I won that quarter from him, and I kept it on my wall. It's still there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you said that he had a certain standard and a demand to get the job done right. So when it wasn't done right, would he correct you or show you, or like,
Yeah.
how did the standard get set in terms of, like, you knew there was a level you had to reach?
His management style was asking you questions. He was not a yeller. He would not ever belittle you or in any way or anything like that. His way is he would come and play 20 questions with you, and at about question number 4, you'd realize, something's not right here.
Okay.
And he would make sure that you knew. He would never really. He was not a bully in any way, like a lot of bosses are. He just wanted to make sure that you knew that, this wasn't up to the standards of George H. Wilson, and we can do better than that. And he had his way of getting across, and it was very effective.
And so that's great. And you told the story of George H. being around and then Jim. Did you see similarities in terms of their standards or their personalities or their how they manage things?
To be honest with you, other than those daily roll the window down and ask me questions, and a couple times where I visited him in his house at Pasatiempo, I didn't know George really well. I think George was a little bit more I think George was probably not quite as easy to get along with as Jim. He was a little,
more demanding.
Yeah. They were both demanding, but Jim had a different way about it. I think George was pretty much up front.
Okay.
From the stories I heard, I think he would just. Jim had his way of teaching you what he wanted, and George would tell you right now, this is better be this way.
Right. Okay. And then so then Jim moves on, and then you got Tom, and would you consider Tom your boss, or Blue, or neither, or
both?
Both.
There was an interim period in the 1980s where there was a guy named Mike Reitman who ran the company, and then Blue, the company had some serious downtimes in the mid 1980s where we were doing a lot of work over in the Santa Clara Valley, a lot, and it wasn't being managed well. This is maybe not an opinion that, I don't know. I think Blue would agree with that. But it was close to being a real disaster. And Blue was working down south for University Mechanical, and he came back in the mid 1980s and took over for Mike Reitman. And then Tom followed him. I don't know exactly the timing, but maybe 3 years later, something like that.
Okay.
And I work for both of them.
Okay.
Tom is yeah, it's sort of hard to explain what their division. They work so well together. There's no, it's not a situation where you need to define their roles because they're just like such a cohesive team. But I work for both of them.
Okay. And what's it like working for them?
The Wilson, you know what the biggest positive about working here? One of the reasons, I have several reasons that I've stayed here for almost 40 years, but the biggest reason is probably that I work for the most honest and best people that you could ever imagine. You don't ever have to worry that they're going to ever lie to you. They'll never lie to you. They'll never try and take advantage of anybody. They'll never do any of that. And in my position, which after my first 10 years here I went into purchasing, it's really important for me to, in my dealings with my negotiations and dealings with people, that people know we have a major reputation for being honest, this company, and it's because of the Wilsons.
So that obviously is something that name represents to
Yes.
you, right?
Not only to me, but to everyone we've dealt with, customers, vendors, subcontractors. They've all had a long history with the Wilsons, and they know that if there's something wrong, the Wilsons are going to do everything in their power to make it right. They're not in this business to take advantage of as many people as they can, which you can't say that about a lot of people in this business. A lot of these people in this business are trying to squeeze every penny out of people.
Yeah, I was going to say that's rare, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So let's go through the history a little bit in terms of your history, but your history in conjunction with Santa Cruz history. So you start in 81, and you're here, what, a year, and we've got the big flood of 82, which I remember as a kid. What are your memories of that time, both in the terms of the town and in terms of working here and what it was like here?
Well, it's in '82, and during the flood, the big memory is that, of course, we were in the floodplain
Right.
on River Street there,
Right.
and our yard most of our yard was on where the big apartment buildings are, but we also had a yard right next to the levee. And I remember going over to stand on the levee and seeing the water literally lapping over the top. And what we were set to do was, there was only so much we could do. And back in those days, you didn't have a lot of electronics. Nowadays, everybody would say, save the computers. There were no computers back then. We didn't even have a fax machine at that point. So what they said is save the vehicles. So everybody drove all the George H. Wilson vehicles up to Holy Cross Church and parked them up there. And as it was, we didn't have any damage. In the wake of catastrophes like that, the biggest memory I have is that everything kind of gets put on hold. All your construction projects get put on hold, and this is true of the earthquake too. And you're just trying to help people recover. and the flood wasn't. I don't remember the flood being as bad as the earthquake, but there was a lot of recovery stuff going on, and for a week or two.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about the earthquake next. Your memories of that in terms of where you were or what it meant.
Tom Wilson and I were walking across the street. We were in front of Outdoor World, which is still there, and when it hit, and I don't remember much about it except that there was a woman coming out of Outdoor World screaming. And for the first, being a California native, when an earthquake hits, it's like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's a good one. That's fine. And all I could think of as 15 seconds was, why is she screaming? Why doesn't she stop screaming? And then about 15 more seconds in, it's like, oh, I know why she's screaming. I get it now.
Yeah.
And so we just sort of stood there and rode the wave. You could see the asphalt, the waves in the asphalt of River Street, and we were actually on a little, like a driveway that's between Outdoor World and what's Fastenal now. And then it stopped, and we both looked up and realized we were standing underneath a huge transformer, which was not a great idea. Then we went back in, and there were major cracks in the building. Everyone evacuated at first. Had to bring in a structural engineer and make sure it was safe to work.
Wow.
But we got back in quickly because during the earthquake, everything really got put on hold for, I want to say, like a month. And all we were doing was repairing water heaters, particularly gas lines, and a lot of emergency work. I remember that Tom and Blue mandated that no one could go anywhere by themselves. There had to be two people on every call.
For safety reasons.
For safety reasons. One of the things that I was tasked with doing is we had to feed people because our employees, there was nowhere open for them to go get lunch. So we had to find food and bring it in there. And my other chief memory of the earthquake came afterwards. So inventory is always a sticky point because nobody wants to have inventory because it costs money. And we have more inventory than we'd like to because being in Santa Cruz, we don't have a lot of sources here. Most of our big sources are either Salinas or San Jose or farther away, Los Angeles even, or further. So we have to keep inventory, but we try, and there's always a tug of war going, we don't want this much inventory, but we have to keep some. Well, Jim Wilson took me aside about a month after the earthquake, and we walked over to the valve racks where we keep valves, and we keep a wide variety of valves: ball valves, gate valves, globe valves, butterfly valves, and a lot of different sizes. And he took me over there and he said, I want you to look at something. And he showed me there were some empty spaces. And he said, the next time an earthquake hits, you better have one of every kind of valve ever made. And I said, Jim, that's not going to be possible. And he wasn't kidding. He looked at me and said, you better have one of every valve next earthquake. And I was like, oh, okay.
Wow. So did you ultimately get, or
no, there's a point where you can't really stock 8-inch gate valves because they cost $3,000 a piece.
Right.
So I had to renegotiate that one with him, but he was pretty adamant. And coming out of that earthquake, it was pretty. If we didn't have any inventory of gas fluxes and steel pipe and valves and a lot of fittings and a lot of the stuff that we have, because we do have a lot of stuff, we wouldn't have been able to do much, but we were able to do a lot because we had it.
That's amazing. I remember, I thought you were going to say you guys were coming back in to watch the World Series, but
no, we were
obviously not.
Probably going to go home and watch it at some point.
Right. And then in terms of, so you said the immediate aftermath was about repairing stuff. Did sort of the environment around the company change in terms of how much work you now had to rebuild and help rebuild the downtown and rebuild all these things that had been destroyed or damaged?
Yeah, we were working a lot of hours at that point. All the union guys were working as much as they could because we had so many calls we couldn't keep up with them. And so everyone was working. Again, a long time ago, I don't remember, but I'm going to guess we were all working 12 to 14 hour days at least. And we were doing it on the weekends too for a while. And everything, and it's not like we weren't doing anything when the earthquake happened. So we had all these jobs, and for a week or so, all these people understood, okay, I understand, but you know, at some point, you have the job you're doing at Dominican Hospital or at Center Tech or wherever, and they call and say, where are you?
Right.
So then there's more work to get done.
Right. Wow, it must have been. Well, you knew you had work, I guess.
Yeah, that was an intense time, and then the move here was a very intense time too.
Well, I imagine for you in particular, right, because you were talking about inventory, right? So at that point, if everyone needs a job and everyone needs something done, I'm assuming at that time that might have been one of your craziest times in terms of inventory coming in and going out, and we need this at Dominican, we need this at UCSC, we need this downtown.
Well, at that time, this would have been in 91, 92, whenever it was. There was a period of about a year where I was working my 8-hour shift, and then I would come here so I'd get off work over there around 5, and I'd come here and work till about 10 at night. And I was doing that there was a period of time I was doing it 7 days a week. And yeah, it was that period, I'd say 6 to 9 months of the major move here was really stressful and exhausting.
Yeah.
And we were kind of designing on the fly too, because the guy that did the major design of this building was a guy named Dick Tranquina, and Dick did a great job, but he was a sheet metal guy. So he was really interested in the sheet metal shop and the offices. He was interested in the office, but as far as the warehouse and the plumbing shop and all that, he's like, well, whatever, I don't care. So that kind of fell to me to do a lot of the designing of stuff and figure out where stuff was going to go, where we're going to get all these racks, where we're going to get all these bins, how we're going to move all the inventory. And then Armando Martinez, who was in charge of the maintenance department, he was the magician that moved. You know, most of these machines in here came from the old shop. Some of these were old in 1980.
Wow.
When some of them are new, but you know, like the press brakes and the shears, they were all well before I came to work here, because they're so they're great tools, and they're still good as long as you keep them in good shape. And to replace like this shear here is probably, I'd hate to even think about,
What that? Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow. Yeah, that's just. That's
So Armando was the guy that was in charge of getting all this machinery over here, and then not only getting it here, but it's all very temperamental. It has to be perfectly level. It has to be, and so he did a lot.
Wow, that sounds like and then just the last thing on the earthquake. What are your memories of just the town in general when that hit and happened, and the reaction to it, and sort of the chaos?
To be honest with you, we were so cocooned because I was living in Watsonville at the time, and my apartment was a shambles, and my wife at the time didn't want to be in there. Like a lot of other people, the aftershocks freaked her out, and so we were sleeping outside in a tent, and I didn't have anything to do other than come to work. So we were all working 12, 14 hours here, and then just going and trying to sleep. And I don't remember even going, and with my particular job, I was there. I was in the office all the time. I think I went out a couple times because there wasn't a second person to go with someone. So I just went out as like a adjunct because I have no mechanical skills whatsoever. So, but other than that, I was in the office pretty much steadily for a month without even sticking my head out the door. I do remember being very nervous about the bridges, because there was one bridge down by Watsonville that went, one highway bridge, not a tall bridge, but a highway bridge that went. And so I remember thinking on my way home to, you know, I go over a lot of these little bridges, I hope they're all okay. But as far as being downtown, I was stuck in the office all the time. I didn't get out to see what was happening down there.
Yeah, no, I get it. So you've been here obviously a long time, 38 years. How much pride do you take in working here?
You know, the best part is when you tell, over the years, when you tell somebody where you work, you can see that from their reaction. It's like, oh man, this company has such an amazingly immaculate reputation with people, not only for honesty, but for doing things right and being imaginative. And I think that's one of the chief reasons that ACCO wanted us. I think if we were not who we were, it wouldn't have been as appealing to them. But ACCO is a really big company. They're a really good company, and they wanted us because of that reputation for skill and imagination and honesty, and you know what? It makes you feel really good to work somewhere like that. There have been a lot of other places that I could have gone to work over the years, and I would have regretted it, because you hear stories later about, you know, there's something shady going on there, or they cheated somebody or something. Those things just don't happen here.
Yeah. And so you find that, you mentioned, so you go out in the community. It's not just you saying, hey, I'm proud to work here, and hey, we've got great ethics, but you get that when you go out and tell people or deal with people.
Yes. Well, because anyone that's had dealings with, and you know, Tom Wilson's the kind of guy you can't, it's sort of irritating sometimes, because if you ever walk somewhere with Tom Wilson, you can't go more than 15 feet or somebody stops you, because he knows everybody. And there's a huge percentage of people in this community, and not only this community, but if you go to Salinas and Monterey and Watsonville and all the other places we work, that know the Wilsons, and they know the red trucks. We fought a lot to keep those red trucks, because it's really inconvenient to buy red vehicles, because white is what they all want to sell you, because that's what comes off. They all come off the line white, and then if you want a red truck from a leasing company or from a dealer, it's like, oh, okay, we'll get it for you, but it's going to take forever. But those red trucks, everybody knows the George H. Wilson red trucks, and everybody who knows the Wilsons knows what stands behind it.
That's awesome. Yeah, the red trucks, it's everywhere. So when you, and then along that line, so when you go around the area and you see some of the stuff that you've helped build or been a part of, what's that like? Are you telling people that are with you, hey, we built that, or hey, you know?
I do. I tell people, and they go, yeah, okay, whatever. But yeah, I think that my sense of pride, I think if you talk to the union guys, because they're there every day, and I think that's a huge deal to them. And it's not like it's nothing to me. It's important to me that we've done all these things, but I get that feeling when I'm here in this building, because I feel like I had a lot to do with the success and the efficiency of this building. So that's where mine. I don't get to go out they don't let me out of my hole anymore. I'm in this cubicle and I'm stuck there all the time. Blue keeps telling me to go visit the jobs, but I just can't find the time. But,
Right.
yeah, it's really cool to be able to say, yeah, we work at every hospital in 3 counties, and we work at you know, almost every large place at one time or another. You know, you can name them off, and we've done work there, or we did the original building.
Right. Yeah, I mean the timeline. Yeah, I mean, you look at it and you just go, wow, there's another one. Whether it's, you know, back in the 50s with Campbell Soup, or into the 70s and 80s with, you know, Dominican and the Coconut Grove, and all the UCSC stuff, and it just seems like it just
There's a lot of stuff
never
over.
ends.
You know, when I came to work here, we had 3 offices. We had an office in Santa Clara that was almost as big as the Santa Cruz office, and we had an office in Monterey, which is much smaller. But we did a lot of stuff. If you go over the hill, we did a lot of the buildings at Stanford. Excuse me. We did a lot of the buildings at United Technologies up in the hills. There, Pacific Valley Bank downtown. Excuse me. Kaiser Hospital in Santa Clara. You know, I can name, as long as my memory holds out, I can name a lot of those. I commuted over the hill for 6 months to be purchasing agent in Santa Clara. That was disastrous.
That was disastrous.
Well, I was working as running the warehouse in the yard in River Street, and I really enjoyed it. And Mike Reitman, who was running the business at that time, he had a purchasing agent in Santa Clara that was retiring. And Mike called me in and said, well, you know what, we're going to make you the purchasing agent in Santa Clara. And I said, no, thanks, that's okay. And I walked out, and the next day they said, well, you know what, you report to Santa Clara Monday or don't come back. So Mike told me so. I said, okay, I'm going to Santa Clara. So I went over there. I had no experience. I was a forklift driver, and we were doing a lot of work, a lot of big buildings, and a lot of tight time frames. And I got 2 weeks training from Charlie Cankel, who was retiring, and got thrown into it. And oh boy, on top of commuting over the hill, which was a pain. And I lasted 6 months at that, and then I said, no, I'm done with this. I want to come back to Santa Cruz.
And at that point, you had the option to.
Yeah, they were.
Didn't sound like when
they were
they said
winding.
you got to go to Santa Clara. Or
Yeah. Well, Blue Wilson was back at that point, and they were winding down the Santa Clara office anyway, and so I came back and started doing what I was doing before until we went through the whole scenario about 4 years later, where they said, okay, Jack McDarris is retiring, we want you to be the purchasing agent here in Santa Cruz. And I said, no, I'm good with what I'm doing. And they said, no, you're going to do this. And okay, so now I've been sitting behind a desk for 28 years.
Wow. So you said you took pride in this, where we are, where we're sitting. So you basically helped build this, and not build it, but like organize it,
well,
set it up, get it where.
A lot of it was, again, this was Dick's Trankina's baby back here. I didn't have a lot to do with this side other than just doing grunt labor, hauling stuff in. But the plumbing side, warehouse, and the breezeway back here, I pretty much designed a lot of that and moved everything in and found the racks and built them. And yeah, I have a lot of pride in this building, and it's been a very functional building now for 26 years. It's the River Street building was the Winchester Mystery House. There was stuff tucked everywhere, and it was inconvenient, and the driveways were bad, and you couldn't load anything, and you couldn't unload anything, and it was bad. And we put a lot of thought in the right way to do this here, and it's, like I said, it's been very functional, and so I take pride in that.
Yeah. So you mentioned designing, a lot of that side of it. Was that design aspect, was that something where it was particularly challenging, or you had to get real creative with it in terms of just conceptualizing how you were going to put it all together, like puzzle pieces? Or
Well, there was a budget. So that was challenging because there was a lot of work with tracking down. I found warehouses that were closing and went and bought their racks from them, all their stuff, so that we got a bargain on that. And then just the moving and keeping track of, there's so many little parts and pieces. In this area you have metal, and there's different types of metal, there's different thicknesses, but it's metal. Well, when you get into plumbing, we have probably around 4,000 inventory items over there. So yeah, it was challenging, but I was young and stupid, and it was fun.
That's awesome. Do you have a memory of a particular project that was particularly challenging, or, that had a lot of obstacles that, real difficult, that things you kind of had to work through and overcome that you take some pride in?
We did a job at Dole and Salinas, and this would have been 15 years ago maybe, where the timeline was such they waited until the lettuce harvest was about to start and then embarked on a multi-million-dollar project. And everything you would typically say, okay, write a requisition, we'll spend a day working on it, we'll get it shipped in a week, and then a week later we'll install it, was no, at 3 o'clock the requisition would hit my desk, and that stuff was supposed to be in Salinas at 7 a.m. the next day. And so there was about, I'd say, 3 or 4 months of that sort of panic every day. Every day was a panic for 3 or 4 months of, oh my gosh, and calling in favors and paying more than we should have for stuff, and to make sure that they had enough material to keep. I have no idea how many guys they had working there. There was a lot working in that building, and it had to be finished before that first lettuce came out of the fields. So that's probably, I mean, there have been a lot of challenging projects, a lot of complicated ones. In the hospitals are always complicated, and the food processing. We just did a project for a vinegar company in Watsonville that had a lot of odds. You get into the food processing stuff, there's a lot of odd things. But Dole kind of sticks out in my head as that was a beast.
Yeah, and you said the deadline was not negotiable.
No, the deadline was the lettuce is going to get picked, and you better be done.
Yeah, that could create a little stress. When you look back on your time here, what are you most proud of?
I think just being part of George H. Wilson. The whole history. I sort of thought about this the other day, because it seemed, I've always thought of George H. Wilson as a thing that was here, it's been here forever. And then I thought about this the other day, that by the time I go, I'm going to be over here over 40 years, 100 years, 40. I've been here 40% of that whole history, which seems like that's forever, and I've been here 40% of that time, and that's a little strange feeling. But I think just being part of George H. Wilson, and I've always been proud to tell people where I worked. Always been proud of it, and I don't think everyone gets to be that way, and so I think that's the biggest thing.
Okay. Any other funny or crazy stories that you want to share of just stuff that's gone on here that stands out?
Let's see, can't tell you that one. It's been, the people that work here, we don't have a lot of craziness, because the people that work here forever. No one, once you get a job here, you don't want to leave here, so people stay. Even the union guys, they want to stay too. So
well, then maybe you could talk about just sort of that atmosphere that is created, in terms of, there's probably a level of camaraderie and all of that, sort of like, if everyone's glad to come to work, that's got to create some sort of feeling of.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, the people that come to work here, like I said, they stay. So you've got a lot of people in the office. The union guys, I can't count the number of union guys that have retired from here, and usually with union people, they come and they go, and they get called out to this company and this company. Well, these guys want to stay here, and every time one of them goes, I can tell you this, that I've thought 50 times. Oh man, when that guy goes, I don't know what we're gonna do. We'll never be able to replace him. You know, Armando over maintenance. Oh, when Armando goes, we might as well shut the doors. But someone always steps up. And with the union guys, it's the same thing. I'm always thinking, wow, man, we got some great plumbing foremen, but they're all of an age and they're going to retire soon. And I don't know about these younger guys. And those guys retired, and the younger guys stepped up, and they're great. We have a great plumbing superintendent, a great sheet metal superintendent now, and it's people want to stay. And in the office, it's the same way. You have a lot of people that are around my age group because we came to work here in our 20s or 30s, and where else are you gonna go? I could have gone to work in San Jose and perhaps made more money, but yeah, it would have been a mistake, and it wouldn't have been worth it. And I got to be my kid's baseball and basketball coach, you know.
Can't put a price on that.
So yeah, and I got to take him to school every morning, and there's things about being here that have made it all worthwhile. And the biggest thing is the fact that the Wilsons have made this such a great place to work, and the people that they've attracted are all diligent and they care. You know, it's hard to work here without and say, I don't care, whatever, because you know you get into this, and like I said, I've known the Wilsons for, I would have cut my left arm off rather than disappoint Jim Wilson, and I've known the Wilsons forever. But a lot of the other people didn't know them, but they came to work here, and they got it from the way they were treated very quickly, that this is a great place to work. I want to be here, and I want to make them proud of me, and that's kind of the way it is.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So the folks that you come to work with all these years, every day, you built up some friendships, I would assume, some
Yeah,
sort of lifetime relationships.
yeah, we've when you look at the people, Sarah, who runs the office up there, she's been here forever. Lisa, who's the controller, she's been here not quite as long as us, but close. Jackson in receiving has been there forever, and yeah, you see these people. I tend to be stuck in my little cubicle in front of my computer now, just, you know, so it's not a party every day, but I trust everybody that works here. I can't think of anybody right now that I have any doubts about here, and that's pretty rare. When you're talking about a workplace with, if you count the union guys right now, I have no idea what we have. I'm going to guess 70 or 75 or so, and a lot of other people have come and gone, and I can't think of any right now that I don't have full confidence in and trust.
And that's rare too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Anything else you want to add that I haven't covered, or anything else you think people watching this would need to know? Or
no, I think we covered it. I think that the key to this company is the Wilsons and their honesty and their diligence and their all the things that are their family traditions have still passed down, and you know, to ACCO's credit, they don't want that to go away. I mean, ACCO's a big company, and it would be easy for them to just absorb us and just say but they are fans of the whole process here, and they've come in here and they've encouraged us, you know, and there's been some pains of going from a company with 70 employees to one with whatever it is, 5,000 or whatever they have, but to their credit, they like what they see here and they don't want it to change too much.
That's good. So they're not messing with it, trying to
Yeah.
reinvent the wheel.
Strangest thing with ACCO is that I've gone to work for a company that's that huge, and in a year and a half, I have not found anyone who wasn't nice. It's weird. It's like, what's going on here?
Makes you think something is going on
Something's
here.
going on, yeah.
There's got to be one.
Yeah, no, they've treated us with respect, and they've treated us really well.
That's awesome. Sweet. All right, Goldie, I think we're
Okay.
good, man.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. Get you unclipped there.